So today we're talking about wedding planners.
You mean coordinators?
No, I'm pretty sure they're called event designers.
Aren't those all the same thing?
Well, that's what we're talking about today.
So stick around and find out which one works best for designing your wedding.
Coordinating your wedding.
Planning your wedding.
If you're planning a wedding and want all the secret tips for a smoother wedding day experience, then stick around as we interview some of the top professionals in the wedding industry. We are Coastline Studios, a fun-loving team of filmmakers who specialize in creating custom wedding films alongside some extremely talented people. Welcome to Let's Talk Weddings. Today we're talking with Rhiannon of Rhiannon Bosse Celebrations, a boutique celebrations planner, wedding designer, florist, educator. She pretty much does it all. Check it out.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Rhi. We're so excited to have you.
Happy to be here.
So if I think back to how wedding coordination started, wouldn't it be like the aunt and uncle, like mistress of ceremony?
Yes.
Is basically like the OG day of coordinator.
Yeah, and they still exist.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So do people like hire you and then still have a mistress of ceremony, and it's just like an honorary title?
I think yes, and then there's personal tasks that we would not handle or prefer not to, that we could
Moving
hand off to
bags
those
and
people,
things like that.
or greeting guests. We're happy to greet guests, but when Aunt Sue and Uncle Jim, who know everyone and are lively and excited and can do that job over us standing there, we would gladly do a million other things and, be in the back doing our work where that couple can be in the front.
Yeah.
They feel special, they're doing a great job, bride and groom feel honored. I think a lot of wedding coordinators got their start doing their own wedding, though, and then learning, wow, it would be really great to have help with X or help with Y. Maybe I can do that now because I've been through it.
What is some of the differences between full service and, I guess, what are the different terms that are out there for planners and
Sure.
coordinators?
Yeah, how much time do we have?
You could go along.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
Well, I like to think full service planners really do everything. If you're hiring or researching full service planners, they should be doing almost everything for you. A full service planner will work with you almost every day, every week leading up to the wedding and make sure all of those pieces come together, track your budget for you, help you find the perfect vendors, and then obviously the week of the wedding and the wedding itself, making sure all those pieces come together. So almost like a foreman on a construction site. A partial planner, in contrast, would be someone that sort of comes on board halfway through the process. Maybe they're making sense of the work a couple's done already. They don't have as much responsibility, but their job is still very important. Day of coordinators, and I do air quotes because I think it's a terminology we need to get rid of. It's impossible to show up day of, right, and know what's happening and who your client is and what they need. So I think day of coordination falls under the umbrella of partial planning, and then the day of is almost just a facet of what the partial or full can be, if that makes sense. So you have your full, your partial, and they all kind of funnel into coordinating on the day of. And then there's a lot of planners, and this is newer, I think, over the last 5 years, who are doing in-house design. So they're not just planning and doing all the logistical tasks, they're also in charge of how the wedding looks. And on top of that, there's a lot of wedding planner designers that also do floral, like we do. The floral is such a big piece of the looks of a wedding, and it's the part that most brides are excited about, and they want, to have a really big hand in picking what goes into their bouquet and their centerpieces. So to find a company that can do all of those things under one roof is a really big value for a lot of couples.
How do you, if you're someone in the market and you're like, I don't know where to start, I know there's all these different levels of planning, what's your advice to someone who's trying to figure out what they should look for?
Yeah, well, I think everyone needs some person, whether it's a full planner or partial planner. Some partial planners come on board 6 months before a wedding, some come on board 6 weeks. So it's doing your research and finding, the right person. But I think everybody needs someone. You physically cannot be a bride, a groom, whatever you want to call yourself, on a wedding day and make sure your guests are being seated correctly for your ceremony while you're waiting to walk down the aisle.
It's my biggest regret. We all have that one thing, and for me it's literally that I did not have someone there because I was so stressed. I made myself physically ill by not just taking a part of the budget and having someone come in.
Same, that's
and
why I
guide
do what
me.
I do. I think you need to hire someone, whether it's a friend that will do it for you because you can't afford a professional, or whether it's researching everyone in your city to make sure you find the right person. Even if you don't hire us and you hire someone else, because there's so many great planners, just really consider what the trade-off is if you don't.
Yeah, DIY bride is like this whole kind of culture that thanks to Pinterest, we're all like, everybody can DIY their own wedding.
Right.
Yeah, and then we all drive ourselves into the ground.
Yeah, and there are things to DIY. Maybe it's favors with Aunt Susie that likes to make pies, but don't DIY your coordination or your flowers unless you have the resources and the know-how and the education and the support. Really try to be cognizant of, okay, what is future bride me or future groom me going to want on that day, and is it doing X, Y, and Z? Usually the answer is no.
Do you have any cautions for people who say, oh, my church has a coordinator, or my reception has a reception coordinator? What do you say to people that kind of use that as,
Two things. One, know the difference between the two, because a church coordinator is not a planner and a planner is not a church coordinator. We can try and be the other role that we're not, but they're not the same, and just know the difference. But then also, the two work very seamlessly together. So we depend on church coordinators to know the church rules and to know the music rules, and and different places of worship have different rules, but like the Catholic Church has a lot of rules and a lot of things. I mean, you guys know shooting, don't go past this line, and flowers, there's so many rules for flowers. You can't have two at the altar, and you can't have it taller than, Jesus will get mad if you do, like there's all these crazy rules.
So you need that coordinator, but they're different roles.
Very
so it's not
roles.
A substitute.
Yes. Yeah.
When it comes to timeline, when should someone have someone booked? If it's like, first we can do like full planning, and then you could talk a little bit about partial planning, but like when is the time, like how far in advance you want to nail that person down?
Instead of how far in advance, I think maybe like the hierarchy of when you would hire them is important. We've had weddings that we've planned in 11 weeks. So saying you should hire a planner a year in advance would not be applicable to that sort of situation. Or destination weddings. A lot of those couples, they just want to get married and they need someone to help manage it. So I think instead of thinking do it at 10 months or 9 months or whatever, so I think finding your venue is obviously very important because that dictates a lot of things, how many guests can fit, location, hotel blocks, things like that. But your wedding planner should be one of the first vendors that you hire.
So if someone's in the market for looking at a planner and they're thinking about budgets, how do planners work? Do they go by the hour? Is it more by the wedding scope, or how does that work generally in the industry?
I think it's market driven. In West Michigan or Michigan in general, I think most people charge a flat rate. So if it's a full planning or partial planning, there's a cost, and a lot of people say starting at, and then there's different circumstances to a wedding that might make that price go higher. So maybe you have a 300-person guest count, which requires more work than 100 people. Maybe you have multiple locations. So you have a mass at 10 a.m., but then you have a cocktail hour somewhere different than the reception, or you have an after party. So prices can vary, I think, based on what planners are giving service-wise. I also think experience is a huge driver for cost. A planner who's very new to the industry and doesn't have the experience might charge a little less than a planner who's obviously been doing it for a decade, 15 years, and knows the ins and outs, has kind of been through the ringer a little bit. So, and then percentage-based pricing, I see that a lot in bigger markets, Chicago, New York, the South, Seattle, things like that, where they will literally charge a percentage of the wedding budget. So if your wedding budget is $50,000, the planner is charging you a percentage of that. So again, it's doing your research and figuring out what price point works with our budget, but also what price point is parallel to the service that we feel good with.
So when it comes to a bride is looking for a full service or partial planner, what are those questions that they should have ready to ask so that they know what they're getting?
Great question. Wow. What do you do? I think when you can explain what you do, why you do it, the value behind it, it makes sense when you give a price, right? If you come out the gate with a price, I think it's hard to make a sale because wedding planners do cost a lot. It's a big ticket vendor next to your venue, next to your photographer, your videographer, and next to your food and beverage. I think asking about experience is important. So then the client can ultimately make a decision on if they're comfortable with how much or how little experience that planner has. I also think couples need to look for planners that specialize in the type of event that they're hoping to have. So if you're hoping to have a backyard tented wedding, it's probably best that you hire a planner who's done a few of those versus someone who just works at a banquet hall where everything's very turnkey. We could talk probably at length about what to ask planners, but do your homework, ask the right questions. There's no questions too big, too small, too silly. I always get clients who are like, this is a silly question, but, and it's never silly, right? It's a big investment, and I want clients, and I'm sure most planners want their clients to feel very comfortable.
Are Are there any red flags that someone could spot if they're looking into planners? Like, ooh, I know that might be touchy too, so.
Yeah,
but
I think.
things to watch out for maybe?
Sure, I think the review thing is really big. Obviously, if a planner doesn't have great reviews, there's something to be said there. Those things have happened. I think maybe having a disconnect with price and experience. So I think if a client is looking for a planner and they've been in business 2 years and they're charging $10,000, that to me is a red flag. That's a very small amount of time to just hike up to, what do you have to show for that?
Right.
I think there's something to be said about rolling with the market and being fair to everybody, but there's also something to be said about being fair to the client. You can't just charge $10,000 because that's industry standard, right? I think another red flag is we're in this culture of Instagram and blogging, and Instagram mainly, social media, where we want to put our best foot forward aesthetically and visually. So we do these beautiful shoots where we control everything and where we have all these pieces that are just lovely and trendy, and it's kind of like clickbait, right? Like, what's going to get people clicking and engaging? And those are great. We learn from those opportunities as vendors, but we put those things out and we only put those things out. So then clients look at Instagram and see all these beautiful fine art shoots that are done in Italy, or they're done at some place that looks like it's in Italy, and a client sees that and thinks, oh wow, that's what this person does. That's a sliver of what that person does. You want to look at what their real weddings look like, how they can transform an ugly ballroom into something lovely, how they can work with a West Michigan in April when it snows venue and make it look like spring should. Those are the things you want to look for. So I think asking, if you don't see on the website, to see examples of work and to read reviews, and if they don't have reviews, I think that's a red flag in and of itself. That's really key.
Perfect. That was really, really informative. I appreciate it. I hope it helps so many brides know who to hire, when to hire them, what the difference is. So this is your chance. Where can people find you?
Sure. So just RhiannonBosse.com is my blog, and then Rhiannon Bosse Celebrations. It's a long one, but if you type that in, it's our website, and that's our, I like to say that's our handshake and our blog's our hug.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. That was so much fun.
All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us on Let's Talk Weddings. Feel free to like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff, and we hope to see you next time.